Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning Committee. First of all, there's a few matters of housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park at the rear of the Town Hall. Audio recordings are made of all meetings and these recordings are published on the Council's website. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphones at all times. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and the use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, by visitors is welcome, but you are requested to use them discreetly, to set them to silent and not use voice or camera flash functions. Those using such devices are asked to remain seated during the meeting. We will have a break at 8 o'clock if there are items remaining. There are no planned fire alarm tests. We've already done that. That's right at the top. With toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in every room. Induction loop in this room. I'm the Chairman, Councillor John Manning. On my right is Deputy Chair, Councillor Jessica Scott-Patel, and the rest of the committee are opposite and will introduce themselves, and we'll start on the extreme right with Councillor Sykes.
Councillor Sykes, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Moore, Westmoor.
Councillor Pauline Hazel, Shrub End Ward.
Peter Chillingworth, Great Tay Ward.
Jackie McLean, Cotford and West Stanway Ward.
Councillor Brian Jarvis, Lexton Ward.
Councillor Joe Hayes, Castle Ward.
Councillor Helen Chua, St Anne's Ward.
Councillor Rosalind Scott, Wivenhoe Quay.
Cyril Liddy, also of Wivenhoe Quay, substituting for Councillor Mike Lilly.
Thank you very much. The planning officers this evening are Alistair Day, Sue Jackson, Carl Allen, Nadine Calder, Chris Harden, Daniel Cameron and Andrew Tyrrell. Amanda Gigi is here for procedural matters. To all present in the room at this meeting, we are a quasi-judicial committee. We make our decisions based on material planning considerations, following the laws of the land and the policies of the council. If we are minded to refuse an application, we will use such considerations that will stand up in a court of law. The material planning considerations are listed in the committee's agenda. Okay, item 2 is have your say. Is everyone who wishes to speak on an item registered their name? If not, could they please do so now?
No one else is indicating, Chairman.
If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, could they please do so now?
No one's indicating, Chairman.
Okay, item 3 is substitutions. We've covered that with Councillor Liddy. Item 4 is urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5, declarations of interest. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. Declaration of interest, I think, prejudicial on item 7.1, as the occupants of Chapman's Farm are extremely well known to me and have been for many years, and I think I should exit myself when that's being considered. Thank you.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Chairman, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest on behalf of my group on item 7.6. The applicant's son is a councillor and he is also secretary of our group.
Councillor Chair.
I've got a non-pecuniary interest on 7.7 because the people living in the apple tree, which is the house behind the Homecroft, are friends of mine.
Any more? Okay, item 6 is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of September 2015. Is that a proposal, Councillor Chillingworth?
Propose that we accept the minutes, thank you.
Seconded, Councillor Chair. All those in favour?
That's approved, Chairman.
Right, I'll now go through the items one at a time to see if we can take any en bloc. Item 7.1, we have Jean Dickinson against. Item 7.2, we don't have any speakers. I believe Councillor Hayes wishes to call that out though and have a very brief discussion on it. 7.3, we have no speakers. 7.4, we have David Sunnox against. We have Andrew Dowell for, and we have Councillor Peter Sheen as a visiting councillor. 7.5, we have Steve Bayes against. 7.6, we have Mary Neville against and Jamie Kelly for. 7.7, we have Bob Tyrrell against, and we have Steve Norman for. We have nobody for 7.8. For 7.9, we have Ben Chowdhury, who is speaking for, but since it's a refusal, it's against officer's recommendation, so we will have to discuss it. And then we have no speakers on 7.10 or 7.11. Could I ask Mandy Chidgey to read out the ones we could take en bloc, please?
Chairman, could we just clarify for councillors Harrington and Goss, who have just come in the room, what items they're here for, please?
I'd like to speak on Chapman's Farm, which I think is 7.1 on the agenda.
And for me, it's item 7.7, please, Chairman. It's Homecroft in West Burgold.
Chairman, that means that as there are no speakers from the committee or from the public, the committee can now opt to make an en bloc decision to agree the recommendations in the reports and the amendment sheet in respect of items 7.3, 7.10 and 7.11.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Scott? Could I have a seconder?
I beg your pardon, Chairman. Could we include 7.8 in the list of en bloc items, which means you have 7.3, 7.8, 7.10 and 7.11.
Are we happy with that now? Councillor Scott to propose, Councillor McLean to second. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go straight on with 7.1.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for an outline planning permission for up to 27 houses on the site currently occupied by Cants of Colchester. The site is located on the east side of the Nayland Road at the northern extent of the Myland area of Colchester. It's located within the defined settlement boundary and is identified for predominantly residential use. The outline application, as I say, seeks consent for up to 27 units. All matters are reserved except for access, and it proposes a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses. The eaves height being similar to those on Walnut Drive and East Lodge. Just to set the context, the existing access to the Cants Farm, to the north, you got the boundary of the farmhouse itself, and then the agricultural hedge. To the south, you've got Eaglegate House and the settlement, or a group of number of houses accessed off a private drive. Within the site, you've got a number of old agricultural buildings. This is looking from the centre of the site to the north towards the agricultural fields. And then, as I say, you look from the fields this is looking towards Nayland Road. It's currently used for growing of roses. And then towards the east, you've got existing housing. This is again looking from the centre of the site back out towards Nayland Road, showing the types of agricultural buildings that are on site. And this is looking again from the centre of the site, just turning round, looking towards Walnut Drive and Chestnut Drive. And this is along the boundary of the eastern boundary of the site. As I say, the application is in outline form, and an indicative layout plan has been submitted to show how the number of dwellings they're seeking could be arranged. There are concerns about the design and layout, and there's a condition recommended that expressly excludes the layout, as it's not considered to be the best layout for this particular site. The access itself is shown here, and that has been subject to discussions with the Highway Authority, and they have confirmed that the access is acceptable. Concern has been raised by a number of residents over the proximity of the proposed dwellings to the adjacent areas. Being in outline form, one of the difficulties or one of the issues is that there is a lack of sort of absence of detail, so it's difficult for, or it's acknowledged that it's difficult for local residents to judge the impact on the proposal might have on them. However, we have a number of policies and guidance in place to ensure that any future reserve matters applications would need to adhere to our adopted standards in that respect. So although the concerns regarding the absence of detail acknowledged, that in itself isn't considered to be a reason for refusal of this application. The proposal is to create also to facilitate access from the application site through to Chestnut Close. As you can see, the access when this site was built was designed with future access to the Cants Farm or Chapman's Farm process in mind, and a condition is recommended that the access is facilitated through the redesign of the layout. What members may or may not be aware, there's the site surrounding it, the Chapman's Farm site, which is located here, we have an outline and detailed reserve matters approvals for the first phase of the Northern Growth Area. Nayland Road itself is to be truncated at either end. Which is sort of, you've got the existing Ford's Lane roundabout at this end, and the Nayland Road is to be diverted sort of up and round, and would link back into the existing road network. So either end, opposite either end of the Cants Farm access will be truncated, and so therefore the traffic implications will be very different to what is currently there. And this plan shows the layout proposed by Countryside Homes for the redevelopment of their site, so it just sort of sets the future context. It's not quite as is on the ground at the moment. Ecology has been a source of concern for a number of the local residents. There has been quite a detailed bat survey and investigations taken place. There is evidence of a bat roost in one of the granary buildings at present. However, it's having taken advice from ecological consultants. Their view is that the loss of the building would not cause significant ecological harm if provided there is a mitigation strategy proposed, which has a condition we're recommending that. There's also been concern about the scope of the the bird survey, and I've set that out in quite some detail in the report in paragraph 1624, which explains the extent and the reason for the scope of the bird survey. Again, the proposed development is not considered to have an adverse impact on birds, and a condition is recommended regarding mitigation and enhancement in respect of birds. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. I will point out to members that there's an error in condition 19, which refers to a footway cycle link between the application site and Walnut Drive. That should actually say Chestnut Drive. So the application is recommended for approval subject to a section 106. I'm happy for others to speak and then answer questions as appropriate.
June Dickinson. You'll have 3 minutes from the time you press the button in the centre. You'll get a bell after 2 minutes just to let you know you've got 1 minute left. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Dickinson, representing the views of Myland Community Council this evening.
Just pull the microphone right down.
Okay, thank you. Okay, MCC's submission is in the agenda documents you've all got and read, so I'm not proposing to go through all of that again. All I'm going to do is to amplify my last paragraph. And in MCC's view, in your agenda notes, it states our position of approval to the principle of new housing at Chapman's Farm. We quite agree with that, but we are requesting the LPA refuse this application at this time. MCC's reasons are that we are disappointed at the lack of community research that has been done by the applicant, overdevelopment of the site. Frankly, what is one of the cheapest and nastiest set of drawing proposals I've ever seen in this area, and that the firm is qualified and established as the applicant's representative should produce such an unacceptable proposal is, we find, quite outstanding. The proposed plans are, in the view of MCC's committee, shoddy, not to scale, pack them in like sardines, solely as an approach to maximise the number of units, with little thought as to how the long-term external needs of the families can be met. MCC disagree with the suggestion of Mr Day that the number of dwellings can be resolved in private post-approval negotiation. Such an approach for this application, we believe, needs to be open to full public representation before a solution can be defined, and certainly not behind closed doors. All the local authorities and communities should have been consulted in the pre-planning stages of this application. The applicant refers to the Myland design statement, but clearly he did not read it in the context of protecting and enhancing the historic environment, nor did they bother to consult Myland Community Council Planning Committee, nor the relevant conditions of the soon-to-be adopted neighbourhood plan, all which refer to this area, this site, and its importance to us. MCC will not accept more tired justifications for more mass housing needing to be planned for Mile End, which caters to continuing greed and maximisation of personal wealth for a few, and is giving nothing back. Chapman's Farm is the very last undeveloped residential site in Mile End, but it's also the seat of our once nationally recognised rose fields. Instead of 27 more tacky box houses, MCC would like to see a sensitive, high-quality, low-density residential development reflecting the site's history and context for the public to see in the same way that we achieved it with Fenright on the development of Blue Gates in Nayland Road. MCC requests the LPA to refuse this application at this time and require the planning officer with the MCC Planning Committee to negotiate a revised brief for the site in accordance with the guidance in the adopted Myland design statement.
Thank you. That's your time up, I'm afraid.
Neighbourhood plan.
I hope you got everything in that you wanted to say.
3 words, miss. Right. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Always a pleasure. Councillor Goss.
Thank you, committee. I'm here to raise some concerns on behalf of the local community. I've already written a submission. We're not going to stop this site being developed, so you're not going to hear my usual mantra about trying to save every piece of space. We're here to talk about it in terms of planning law and planning grounds. However, I do think that it is overdevelopment. I think that the design, although it's outlined, of course this always makes it more difficult because we're talking about the principle of a square around a piece of land and the fact that you're going to put some houses on it, not all the design. However, there is a principle being submitted here. A number of local residents have raised concerns about this design would have an impact on their property. However, I also understand because it's an outline plan, there's not too much you can say about that because it's not the formal detailed plans. However, I think there's obviously a working model here. So there are some concerns about the density. I think it would be good if we could send this back or defer this, send it back and see if they could lower the density. The highway issues are still being dealt with by Essex County Council. It was actually nice and refreshing to see on the portal that they have raised concerns and are still in conversation with the applicant, which is actually a breath of fresh air. And there are obviously ecology concerns that have been raised, and they are referenced quite heavily in this report. And I still think there is some further work to be done on the ecology. So I definitely think there are enough concerns here under planning law and policy for you to potentially send this back for further work before you set the outline, because once this outline is set, it makes getting changes to the housing numbers and density much more difficult, because you've in effect rubber stamped it, unless of course the applicant decides to lower the density or change it. But once the 106 agreement is signed, it's pretty much done. So I would just ask you to think about the impact on local residents, because I do think that this plan will move forwards in this current design, probably with some tweaks, and I certainly support a lot of the comments made in the submission from Myland Community Council. Just one point, so we do not get road names wrong, because we're very good at that. Chestnut Drive is not Chestnut Drive, it's got 4 houses in it, it's called Chestnut Close. So if you are going to amend it, can we please get the right road name into the conditions? That's pretty much all I'm going to say. I am going to have to leave the meeting shortly because I have another meeting to get to, so I may miss the debate.
Mr. Day, if you'd like to respond.
Yes. First, regarding density, the site is sort of 0.95 hectares in size, almost a hectare, and it's proposing 27 units. So at 27 dwellings per hectare, that wouldn't seem unduly dense in terms of the local context. The site opposite is being developed at 33 dwellings to the hectare, which is being done by Countryside. Likewise, Mersey Homes are also developing on their first phase at a similar density. So in terms of density, it is fairly typical of what is around there and been approved previously as being acceptable. Myland referred to a lack of continuity in research regarding the type of houses and the proposed, or the concern about having lots of boxes. As I said in the presentation, it is an outline application. It is for a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings up to 27 in number. So it is providing for a variety of householders. The 106 requires that 20% of those units are for affordable accommodation, so it's providing for sort of those that can't currently afford to get on the housing market as well. So I think that it does provide a mix of houses for the local area. The comments on the quality of the drawings are noted. The drawing is very much an indicative sketch. It is not to be taken as read or gospel that it will be developed in that way. As I set out in the report, there are a number of shortcomings in respect to the layout. However, officers are comfortable that the site is of a sufficient size to get up to 27 units on there, and we are comfortable that that can be designed in such a way so as not to infringe the council's adopted policy in terms of amenity standards, either in terms of size of gardens and parking for those that for the proposed houses, and or those impact on those adjacent neighbours. Comments regarding consultation, again, are noted. Obviously, if a reserved matters application is submitted for this site, that will be subject to the normal consultation processes, and the neighbours and the Myland Community Council will be consulted as a part of that process. Comments made by the Myland Community Council about the failure of Fen Rights to consult with them prior to submitting are noted, but the local planning authority weren't consulted prior to its submission and would have to deal with the application as submitted. So, yes, those comments are noted and they can be appreciated, but that's not really a reason for refusing an application. The highway comments, the roads and the access that has been proposed is designed to create a safe access in the current context, i.e. Nayland Road being the main 1A134. As I alluded to in my presentation, that road is to be truncated to the north and south of this site. So in effect, it will become very much a cul-de-sac style of development. With that in mind, it is a condition that's being proposed to amend or have an alternative access design proposed by the applicant that takes into context the actual road system that will be there in place, which will mean that it'll be sort of reduced in terms of the width, so it'll become a much more, or it won't be so over-engineered as currently proposed. Points about ecology, again, are noted. As I say, concern has been expressed about a number of red list species in and around the area. As I set out in the report, the fact that you may have a red list species that is identified as using the area, for example, skylarks, it is explained that those are very much a red list species due to their breeding in Scotland, not due to the fact that they overwinter in Essex. Also, those that are noted to be more likely to use the site, the advice is that the site in question is unlikely to be of great significance to them. So the redevelopment of the site will not have a significant adverse impact on birds, and there are conditions to require mitigation and enhancement as a part of the redevelopment of the site. Likewise, in paragraph 1625, the issue of the bats has been raised and considered, and again the conclusion is very much that the loss of the granary building would not have a significant adverse effect on the roosting provided a suitable alternative roosts are provided as part of the redevelopment, and again there's a condition recommending that needs to be done. I think I've touched on all those points that have been raised.
Thank you. And the first person in the list is me. Just a couple of bits of clarification, please. With regards to, you spoke about an entrance via Chestnut Close. An entrance to where? Because there seems to be a building in the way of that. Is that not Walnut?
No, Walnut. It goes from Walnut Drive into. Sorry, It's Walnut Drive into. They've got the names wrong. It is Chestnut Close, which is the one further down that goes access in, which is here. This is that point. It's there where we're proposing the access, which. Oh, sorry. It's Chestnut Close there. So that's the access from the other side. So it's that road at the present stops at the fence, which I understand is the boundary of the site, and then the proposal is to create a pedestrian cycle link through, which will then access through to the neighbourhood centre being planned as part of the Northern Growth Area urban extension.
Right, because so the map that they've sent in is wrong. Okay, right, that's clarified that bit.
I'm mapping system as well. Hence the confusion of the names.
The second thing, and I hate to quote Councillor Arnold on this, this seems to reek of something he used to call prematurity. It's kind of, we're getting it before it's quite ready. Shouldn't this wait until after the Nayland Road has been closed off at both ends? Would it be reasonable to condition it that it can't come forward until Nayland Road is closed at both ends in order to help with the traffic issue? We say 27 per hectare is fine. do we take out the amount of road space that's going to be needed on the site when we're working that out? Because I think this is one of those sites that's going to use quite a lot of road space, and that obviously increases the feel of the density, if not the actual density itself. And they're really my two comments on there, because I do think it is overdeveloping it. However, I think in planning terms we're sort of stuck with that. We have a policy of this is what we allow, and this kind of fits within it, even though it sort of doesn't sit very nicely. But Councillor Hazel, then Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you very much, Chair. I agree with everything you've said, and I have great sympathy for the Community Council and for the residents. I do think this is premature, and I would be very happy to see it deferred. I think it is actually disrespectful for developers to put in plans such as this. Local residents need to have confidence in the quality and the design of the build that's going to be on their doorstep. And this doesn't allow that. I think the number of concerns that the neighbours and the community council have are relevant, and I think we ought to deliver them. And I hope that the developer, if it is deferred, if the committee decides to defer it, the developers will actually be very pleased to communicate with the community council and to actually show and give evidence of their design quality and their build. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I take the point raised by the Community Council, and I would ask the developer to communicate directly with the Community Council and as representatives of the residents of the area before they formalise their design. I think we find as a committee that the best and most accepted developments have had quite close discussions with the local residents before it actually ever comes to the reserved matters application. Having said that, this is within the built-up area of the borough, so the principle can't be denied that this development one day will come forward, and this is an outline proposal. The fact is the developer hasn't spent time and effort preparing a detailed design because he doesn't have to. And unfortunately, that has rather put people off, I think, what could be a very worthwhile development. I don't think there is a real planning reason for refusal because of this. It's outline. I'm pleased that there's a 20% affordable housing element included, and that will form part of the Section 106 agreement that, if we do pass it tonight, will have to be signed within a certain period of time. The design is up to 27, although, as the officer has pointed out, that's well within the normal guidelines for developments in Colchester. And I hope this does develop into a pleasant estate which has the agreement with the local residents. But on the basis that this is just outline, I would like to propose that we accept the recommendation with the conditions suggested. Thank you.
Are you seconded it?
No, I'm not.
Okay, one thing at a time. We now have a proposal on the table from Councillor Chillingworth. Is that seconded? That's seconded by Councillor McLean. We do have some other speakers. Your name is back on the list and you'll be able to put for deferral. Councillor Scott.
I feel very concerned about this coming in just before the neighbourhood plan. I think that suggests that it isn't likely to have taken into consideration MCC and the the wishes of the residents. I think it is premature. I'm put off by the poor quality and also by the fact that we can't see how it will fit in with the new road. So I would be very keen to defer this and request that it does fit with the neighbourhood plan.
I've got Councillor Hayes, then Councillor Hazel.
I am somewhat puzzled as to what precisely we are being asked to approve, because we have an outline application and we know the outline of the site and we know that it's got in principle designation for residential. But we're shown a sketch which we're told is indicative, and there's a number of houses sort of crammed in. I mean, but if it's only indicative, we haven't really got any clear idea what the final thing is going to look like. And I must say I didn't like that sketch at all. And my second point is that the environmental impact assessment side of this is a major application, and I gather that it's a case where there has to be an assessment, and not for the first time. There's a report from the developer's choice of consultant that basically says that everything's fine and that the red list species of birds that are observed on the site aren't going to be adversely affected. And I do think we need, as an authority, to sort of put down a marker that we do take this very seriously, and I would like to suggest that the Council commission its own independent environmental impact assessment. Otherwise, I agree particularly with the remarks of Councillor Scott.
Councillor Hazel.
Thank you very much, Chair. If it hasn't been made already, I'd like to propose that we defer this. I meant to ask, what happens if we pass this under these orders and the plans that are then submitted are really, the Community Council really do not like, and it causes problems in that regard? What could be done then if if it's not suitable for local residents? I mean, do we have a second opportunity to actually say it needs to be changed? If it does, then that's helpful. But just a bit of clarification on what would happen if we allow this to, if we approve this now.
Councillor Moore.
I'd just like to second the proposal to defer.
Okay, Alistair Dave, if you'd like to come back on the comments.
Yep. As I said at the beginning, the application is submitted in outline form with all matters reserved except for access. So members and local residents and others cannot we cannot really hold any weight to the layout plan that has been submitted. That is purely an illustrative concept, how the architect or the plansmith thought you could get 27 units on there. It's to demonstrate that it is possible to get 27 on there without, in terms of complying with our adopted standards, etc. But that is not being we haven't asked for a condition to say that it shall be substantially in accordance with the layout. We are acknowledging that there are shortcomings with that layout and that an alternative layout scheme will need to be submitted as a part of the Reserve Matters approval. The Reserve Matters approval will look at things like design, layout, It will need to consider the impact on residents in terms of overlooking, overbearing, overshadowing, etc. It will need to look at the detailed landscape design, etc. So all those matters are reserved for the next size, which in effect will be a detailed scheme demonstrating that they can get up to 27 units on there. Those 27 units could be 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, depending on the mix the developer ultimately wants to put on there and what he can get on there in terms of complying with our standards. So it might be that you can't get 27 large 4-bedroom houses on there because you can't get all the garden areas. So there will almost certainly be a mix of housing types being promoted as that scheme comes forward. That will be subject to the normal consultation exercises. So if they were to submit a scheme that resulted in the adjacent properties being overlooked, overshadowed, or having an overbearing influence on the existing residents, that would be a legitimate reason for objection and or refusing a future application. However, if they can demonstrate that they can comply with the council's adopted standards and will not have an adverse impact on the character of the area or the amenity of local residents, then there is no reason why the application shouldn't be approved in the future. But as I say, it is literally you're being asked to approve the access to the site and that the red-lined area can accommodate up to 27 houses. The detail is for the reserved matters approval that will be submitted, and as I say, there will be proper consultation undertaken on that. As I said previously, I can appreciate that if you're a local resident and you see a layout as submitted, you can think it's going to have an adverse impact on you and you don't understand where the windows are and how it overlooks you. Unfortunately, that is one of the problems of an outline application, but members will be aware that we cannot stop a developer or a landowner putting in for an outline permission. So we cannot refuse an application on the grounds that they have submitted an outline application. That is just not an option that is available to members. And if members are concerned that it is overdevelopment, then that would need to be properly articulated on how you think that is overdevelopment. But on the basis that it equates to sort of around about 28 dwellings to the hectare, and all the neighbouring developments are developing at sort of between 30 and 35 dwellings to the hectare, I would respectfully suggest that would be a very difficult argument to sustain at an appeal. Regarding the closure of Nayland Road, the access that has been designed with the existing road and the existing context in place. In terms of highway safety and highway capacity, the Highway Authority have advised that there are no reasons to refuse it in terms of having an adverse impact upon those two issues. From the planning officer's perspective, we are aware that the diversion to the A134 is under construction. We have been advised by Mersey Homes, who are the lead developer on the adjacent site, that road should be finished by March next year. With that in mind, we have suggested that, given that this site is unlikely to come forward as quickly as that it would be opportune to say, well, if that is coming forward and that road is going to be in place by March next year, rather than having a road that is designed for the current road layout, it would be much better to seek a more sympathetic access to the site, which is more in keeping with what will ultimately be a cul-de-sac style development. If this does happen to come forward in advance of the A134 diversion taking place, then the existing road or existing junction as proposed is suitable and they could revert back to that. But there is that condition that provides the options that should it come forward at a slightly lighter time frame, that can be remodelled and narrowed down so it becomes much more acceptable in terms of the then context of the site. In terms of EIA development, this development does not need an environmental impact assessment. It's not of this scale, size or type. that will trigger any of the requirements under the EIA regulations. The site has been subject to various ecological reports. The initial bat survey suggested there may be the potential for bats, and the application was initially, or the time for determining it was extended, because officers said they needed to demonstrate whether there was a presence for bats on the site or not, and what that presence was like, and if there was a presence, what mitigation would be needed if the roost or woods was to be lost. The report is quite extensive that has been submitted in terms of the time and frequency of the surveys. They've established that it's not a breeding roost, it's I think they describe as a transitory roost, i.e. it is not a permanent roost, it's one of those buildings that are used periodically during the course of the year as a sort of a temporary roost structure, rather than being a permanent roost during the summer period months only. The advice from the ecological people is that if the building is lost, provided you provide additional bat roost within the development, and they're recommending 3 certain types of roosts that go back in, then that would be adequate compensation. In terms of red list species, there are no red list species that have been actually identified on the site. The northern growth area has a population of skylarks, which are a red list species, but this redevelopment, this site would not have an impact upon those, because skylarks do not use the site. Other birds that have identified on the wider area, again, have not been identified or found on this site. Those that have been identified, both through the ecological reports that submitted and through local residents, such as house sparrows, starlings and song thrushes, the report acknowledges they may well use the site. However, the government guidance is very clear. We should only require additional survey work where there is concern that it will have a significant adverse impact upon those birds. And the view is very much that, yes, the site will be redeveloped, but the loss of this site to housing would not have such a significant adverse impact upon sparrows, starlings, etc., to justify refusal, particularly if you are mitigating in terms of replacement or of hedgerows and additional landscaping through tree planting and provision of bird boxes, etc. So I do not believe that you could require further ecological survey work to be undertaken that is reasonable. I think I've covered all the points.
Thank you. I've got 3 councillors to speak. It's myself, Councillor Chillingworth and Councillor Moore. First thing that occurs to me is on point 4.0. It speaks about the application seeks planning permission for the construction of 27 two-storey dwellings. The application is submitted in the outline with all matters reserved except for access. And yet here we are with no access from Chestnut Drive, which is surely an access to the site, and I don't see how we can actually allow this to go through as is without access to the site, because it specifically says with access. So to my mind, I think we now, and I don't think I certainly haven't got the idea from anyone on the committee that anybody actually particularly wants to refuse this application, so I don't think we're talking appeals. I think what we're talking about is show us how it's going to work properly and we can go from there. You know, this is about the access. That there does not show the access that is needed for this site, so to my mind I'm very likely to support Councillor Hazel.
Can I just clarify that? The access that is being applied for is this access onto Nayland Road. That is the access that's being applied for and sought. No, sorry. That is what's being sought. It's an outline application with access onto Nayland Road that's being sought. Planning officers have said that there is, when the Carries, what's known as the Carry site historically, this site here was designed to facilitate a pedestrian and cycle access through from that site through to this site. There's no requirement to do that, so if that is a concern for members, members could strike that condition out. Likewise, it is considered good practice in terms of urban design to create a link through to the northern part of the site that will be developed ultimately by Mersey Homes. Again, if members don't want that, that condition can be struck out. So the access only being sought under the outline application is the access onto Nayland Road. Any other access is being suggested as a condition to facilitate permeability and linkages through to adjacent sites. It's not being sought under this application, under the outline. It is something the planning officers and urban design officers and the transportation and county people think is good practice in terms of urban design, connectivity and linkages.
The second thing I was going to say was it would be really useful if this was to be granted tonight, that all the outline or the reserved matters, sorry, went via the ward councillors, and the ward councillors were invited to input into that process, so that they can put forward residents' concerns, because this has the potential to be a really fantastic estate, and it would be a shame if just a small lack of communication was to ruin it. Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I said in my earlier words that I was recommending that the developer talks to the local people. That obviously includes the ward councillors as well as the community council. I'm sure the developer is listening. He's here tonight, I'm sure. What I wanted to say is basically we are approving a bare site. We're not approving anything that you see up there except that access. So any permeable proposals will come forward at the next reserved matters application. And what I wanted to say, that I think it's important that that reserve application comes before the committee. And my proposal still stands on the condition that the reserved matters comes to committee.
Councillor Hayes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Moore first.
Thank you. Is it possible to clarify you may have said this already and I'm sorry if I've forgotten it, the development to the east around Chestnut Close, etc., what is the density there? Because if this is substantially more than that, then I think that's a relevant factor. That's to the west. What's to the east? What is the density to the east?
I haven't got a drawing of that, but what was known as the Cowie site, that is the section that we're talking about, the access coming through from, was about 0.7 hectares in size, and that accommodated 24 dwellings.
So in fact it's a similar density?
It will be a similar density, whereas this is 0.94 hectares and it's proposing up to 27 units.
Right. It comes to mind, when that road has been diverted, this is not a development that will be seen from the road at all. In fact, it's at the back of another housing estate. No buildings should be built that aren't decent quality, but I think perhaps the fact that it's going to be hidden away, perhaps we're getting worked up about it.
What I would say is I acknowledge that it would be a fairly insular site. It's going to be surrounded by existing housing to the east, proposed housing to the west and the north. So it is not going to be on a main public corridor, so it won't be a visually prominent site. However, that does not mean that we shouldn't be expecting a high quality standard of development, or a development that has an adverse impact on its neighbouring properties. I wouldn't be wanting to come before committee and advocating something that has that either has an adverse impact or is of a poor design. It needs to be contextual in terms of the size, scale, mass of the buildings, and it needs to fit in with its surroundings and be to the best design possible.
Councillor Hayes.
Going back to the indicative drawing, I cannot see how the access from, yes, the photo, yes, and combined with the photo we were just looking at, am I right that what's called Walnut Drive is actually Chestnut Close? Right, so the end bit, yes, there. I cannot see how that can be an access at the same time as maintaining the 27 dwellings, because there's a house right bang in the way of that proposed road. So are we just talking about a little footpath or something? It just seems to me that there's something a bit dishonest about the way it's laid out, as though it's possible to have, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So that's the first point. I don't think that the 27 makes any sense in the context of that access. Secondly, I'd just like to point out it's not very helpful to notice that it's described as Nayland Road, Nayland on that. I mean, have they actually been there? It is nowhere near Nayland. It's just so careless. Then on the corner there, it says highway tree to be removed. So this is, I mean, if this is about the access onto and from Nayland Road, then they're asking for permission to remove some trees which are not on the other plan we were shown. I think that's pretty unfortunate, and I suppose we have to grit our teeth and not mind about losing yet another group of trees. My next point, going back to report paragraph 16.22, and again going back to the question of the wildlife. 16.22 says there are no records of birds within 1 kilometre, but that's down to lack of recording rather than genuine absence of birds. I mean, are they serious? You know, the residents are saying that they've seen red list species here. And then the report of the supposed experts says, well, there aren't actually any records, but there might be some birds, but we're just going to go on the fact that nobody has actually made a record. And this takes me back to my point. I think there ought to be another proper assessment, and it may be that it's not considered reasonable for the applicant to undertake further bird surveys at this site, but what about local policy set out at 1620 and 1621 that says that local policy is to conserve or enhance biodiversity? I mean, we can't do that if we don't even know what's actually there.
Mr. Day, have you got anything else to add?
Yes, I can address or answer some of the questions. Members will obviously be aware that as a part of an outline application, they can request the future reserve matters details come before them and not through, it'll be issued through delegated powers under normal circumstances, so that is perfectly feasible. In terms of consultation, I suspect the current owners will not themselves be bringing forward this site for development. It will be sold to another, but certainly there can be a strongly worded informative that highly recommends that anybody who brings forward a reserve matter enters into preliminary inquiry dialogues with Myland Community Council and or ward councillors as a part of bringing forward the scheme for development. In terms of Councillor Hayes's concern about the access from the east, the layout plan as proposed it's recommended that that is not accepted because it didn't facilitate access through to the east. Yes, if we were to accept a development as shown, then clearly we wouldn't be asking for access through there because you would have to go through the rear garden of number 12 or whatever it says on the drawing. We would expect the whole of that area to be remodelled to facilitate pedestrian cycle linkages through there. So the houses, as you see, would not come forward in that way in terms of in a future reserve matter. It would need to have a total rethink and a redesign. So we're not saying the development when it comes forward will be based upon that. We're saying it needs to have a radical rethink in order to create a much better sense of place that links through to the adjacent sites, maintains the standards in terms of parking and garden sizes, and doesn't have an adverse impact on the adjacent properties. So we mustn't get caught up with that plan. Officers accept that plan is not satisfactory, and there's a condition that specifically excludes that plan. So often with outlines we say should be functioning in accordance with the illustrative layout. In this case we're saying no, it should not. It needs to be an alternative design. So the issues that have been brought up tonight in terms of impact on or potential impact on residents would need to be assessed through the reserve matters, and it will be a different layout that comes forward ultimately. In terms of the trees, there has been a tree survey undertaken on the site. The trees on the site are classed as either category C, which is trees that shouldn't constrain the site, or category U, trees that should be felled. The tree officer has looked at the report and is in agreement with the tree report. The trees can't act as a constraint, so the existing trees on the site will be lost. However, again, we would expect to see mitigation in terms of tree planting as a part of any future scheme. We would not expect to see the loss of trees and then not be mitigated or replanted as a part of any future development. The comments about the ecology and the absence of birds and absence of bats, etc., that was raised with the applicant fairly quickly after the submission. I was fully aware of the fact that, having dealt with the adjacent sites, there are clearly birds on site. What it is when on a site such as this you do what is essentially a desktop assessment, and there are certain records that you are expected to consult locally. Those, unless people submit surveys to those records, then there is an absence, in inverted commas, of birds. Now, the consultant was quite clear that saying that is not really going to be the case. Virtually everywhere in this borough will have some birds of some description, although they may not be formally recorded on a formal record somewhere. I had raised with them the fact that as a part of the northern growth area there are various red list species in and around the site, and they have issued further clarification explaining how you deal with an assessment of birds on a site such as this. They have also looked at the comments by the number of the local residents that have picked up on certain species of birds that are locally, and provided clarification as to why they are red list species and how they affect in terms of this development. As I say, that's set out in paragraph 1624. For example, the Red Wing and Field Fair, it says that their red list status is because there are few breeding pairs in Scotland, and they only use Essex as a sort of point of passage. The loss of this land would not affect the birds in that sense, because they don't actually reside on the site. They're on adjacent sites. They're not on this particular site. They're in the area, but the redevelopment of this site is unlikely to have a direct impact upon how they work at or breed or use the surrounding area. They acknowledged in their original report, and they also acknowledged that the local residents have noted species such as house sparrows, starlings, song thrush that potentially use the site. They explained that nested birds are a protected species, so if there's nesting on the site, then those nests cannot be disturbed by the redevelopment. But in redeveloping the site, the loss of the site or the change of the character of the site from an existing farm complex to a residential area is not going to be so significant as to cause an adverse impact upon the breeding habits of those birds. You'll obviously have new vegetation and planting going back in. Residents will no doubt have plants, etc. So although the character of the site will change quite considerably from an existing sort of farmstead to a residential area, that change will not have a significant adverse impact upon those bird species in terms of how they use and operate around the area. So it's in that context and on that basis officers have accepted the ecological reports, they've asked the clarification where things seem to be slightly amiss. They've provided further details on how the site is used and in the context of the site and what impacts directly on it. And there would not be a substantive reason to recommend refusal on the grounds of impact on birds, but it's acknowledged that they do use the site and there is potential to enhance through bird boxes, additional veg planting, etc. So we don't dismiss the impact on birds. We're saying that it is not significant enough to refuse, but there's scope for mitigation and enhancement through the redevelopment of the site.
Councillor Hazel, I believe you wanted to come back. While you're speaking, could you outline exactly what the grounds are for your deferral that cannot be dealt with by reserved matters, please?
Well, I hope I can clarify that, Chair. Mr Day has actually made my point in regard to the birds. I would have thought that housing, gardens, hedging, trees would actually encourage birds and birds would proliferate in a way that they do not currently. And what I was going to say was, providing this comes back, this is where I wasn't clear, providing if this is passed tonight and it then comes back to the committee for adjudication, as it were, I am happy to cancel my withdrawal. Thank you.
That being the case, we have one proposal on the table from Councillor Chillingworth. It was seconded by Councillor McLean that we accept this application subject to it coming back to the committee for final approval on all reserved matters. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in favour.
All those against?
That's 3 against, Chairman.
Thank you. That motion is passed. 7.2. Councillor Hayes, did you have a very specific question? If so, it might be worth just to truncate things if you ask the question first, and we'll get Councillor Jarvis back in the meantime.
I do, yes. I wish to know whether if approved, this application would result in any reduction in the environmental, as it were, quality of the development. Because, sorry, I'm just trying to find the page. This is about the old police station at 37 Queen Street, and the proposal is to remove conditions 3 and 4 that were relating to accreditation of certain standards of construction, as I understand it, and I just would like an explanation as to what the actual effect on the quality of the building is going to be.
The accreditation scheme was, as I set out in the report, a requirement of the grant funding, and the accreditation and registration is quite an expensive exercise, and that grant funding stream has been lost. The architect has advised that many of the measures used to improve the thermal efficiency of the building is still intended to go ahead, and they'll still be looking to comply with all the requirements under building regulations in terms of insulation, etc. The main thing that is likely to be lost as a result of that is the installation of the PV panels on the rear elevation of the what's known as the annex, which is that building there, due on the grounds of cost, but most of the other elements will be reinstated. I'm advised that if it's a requirement to do the BREEAM regulations, then it brings the whole of the scheme into jeopardy, and we'll end up with a listed building in the heart of the town centre, in the heart of what is a key regeneration area, remaining underused and or vacant. As I say, the condition was purely a requirement of the EU grant funding. It's not something that we would normally seek to attach to a development of this size and scale. As I say, and this is for those reasons it is being suggested it's being removed. This is a change of use. It's like it would have to comply with building regs in terms of improvement in energy efficiency and energy performance, etc. And that is, as no doubt members will be aware, things like in residential properties, Code for Sustainable Homes has been removed, and the government saying it should all be dealt with through building regulations. We've pretty much taken the same view here, is that there are requirements to upgrade in terms of building regulations. Yes, you may. It hasn't been confirmed as yet, but it may be that the PV panels on the back aren't installed, but it's surely better to get the building back into an active economic use in this area, rather than have the scheme mothballed because there is problems with funding, etc.
Councillor Hayes, you want to come back?
Well, what concerns me is that the council is the applicant, and presumably we want to set the best possible standards for other developers. And I'd really like to know, I mean, is this just saving money now and having higher fuel bills for the duration of the life of the building, or which seems to me a bit of a false economy, but may just be a matter of whether it comes out of capital and revenue and so on, or is there actually not much substantial difference in the thermal efficiency of the development if these conditions are removed?
In terms of thermal efficiency, I don't think it would make a lot of difference. They will be insulating the roof structure. They're looking to overhaul and overhaul the windows to the main building. The rear in the annex they're looking to put double glazed windows in. They're looking to insulate the annex in terms of the walling, etc. So in terms of the thermal efficiency of the building, I think there's not much in it. It is the things like the installation of PV panels that, from a historic building perspective, there was concern at, and in terms of the visual impact of the in terms of the building and the character of the building. However, the view taken at that time was that the scheme would get the building back into reuse, and there are a lot of sympathetic alterations that were being done. For example, you'll be familiar with the building, it's got quite an ugly conservatory on the back. They were removing that, putting in reinstating sash windows and French doors to return the building back into more of its original condition. So those benefits were seen to outweigh the potential harm of the PV panels. There is a debate, or a lot of evidence, that the payback time on PV panels is often questionable. You often see them installed, particularly as these were the artificial slate types rather than the larger sort of panels, that it's questionable whether it would have a remarkable uplift in terms of the energy consumption and loss savings, etc. I think in terms of by insulating and improving the building's thermal capacity, we're probably not going to be far off from where we were originally.
Okay, I need someone to propose something. Councillor McLean, are you proposing? Councillor Hayes is seconding. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 7.4, Cooper's Beach Holiday Park, East Mersey. And it is Sue Jackson to present.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a change of use of land adjacent to the existing Cooper's Beach Holiday Park at Church Lane, East Mersey. Members may be familiar with the Cooper's Beach site, which I think you visited sometime earlier this year when we were looking at an application to convert existing farm buildings into a number of holiday lets. This application relates to land on the opposite side of Church Lane. It's a 3.5 hectare site. This aerial shot may show in a bit more context. You can see the mainly triangular site of the existing caravans and the buildings to the north, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail later on, but basically you've got the area of the existing former agricultural buildings and also East Mersey Hall and the church at East Mersey. The access to the site is obviously via the Strood along East Mersey Road and then down Church Lane. Beyond the church, the road then becomes a private road and it's also a public right-of-way. This site was designated as part of the site allocations in 2010 for holiday use, so holiday use has been accepted on the site in principle. The application is to site 60 holiday lodges within the area. I think I should make it clear that the application is for a change of use. The actual lodges themselves aren't development that requires planning permission, it's the use of the land. So what we're looking at is the change of use of the land for the siting of these 60 holiday lodge caravans. We can obviously control the number of holiday lodges on the site and we can control the extent of them. But what we can't control is their actual location and positioning and arrangement within the site itself. As well as the holiday caravans, the proposal also includes landscaping along the site boundaries, particularly along the west boundary where it's adjacent to existing agricultural land, and the land to the south is also within the applicant's ownership. This shows a typical lodge, obviously the size, similar size to the large caravans that are on the site at the moment, twin units that fall within the definition of a caravan within the Caravan Sites Act. These photographs of the site, you can see existing hedges along the boundaries and a pumping station that's under construction that was granted planning permission last year. And other photographs looking towards the edges of the site. And what you can see here is the existing substantial planting along the private road boundary. As I explained, this is also a public right-of-way which leads down to the beach. In terms of consultations, none of the consultees have raised any objection. Original concerns from the Highway Authority were overcome once the applicants submitted further clarification in terms of sustainable forms of transport which were promoted as part of the holiday use. Probably one of the main consultees was Natural England. Previously, when 12-month occupancy has been proposed, there have been concerns about the impact of visitors on overwintering birds. but the Natural England has raised no objection in this particular case, subject to a condition requiring a code of conduct to be submitted. And this is something that is carried forward from other recent planning permissions on the site, and the applicant is already in discussions with Natural England and our planning policy team in terms of agreeing that code of conduct to really restrict and organise activities and other functions during, excuse me, during the winter period. The report also clarifies the representations that have been received. I think there's two main areas that residents are concerned about, together with the parish council and other representations, which is really relates to the additional traffic generated by the use. And another concern has been alleged residential use of the main caravan site rather than holiday use. These allegations have been investigated by our licensing team, who have found no evidence of unauthorised use on the site. The licensing team are continuing to make regular visits to the site to ensure that the applicants' procedures in terms of getting permanent addresses and other information to confirm that those records are kept up to date and are comprehensive. This aerial photograph shows the two listed buildings which are referred to in the committee report. Obviously the blue areas identified on the plan, which is the East Mersey Church and East Mersey Hall. Then this photograph from the entrance to the site for the lodges is looking more up Church Lane, and you can see the church in the distance. And this photograph shows the existing church car park. The applicants have offered to do some surfacing works to the car park, which is used by the church, but is in the ownership of the holiday caravan site, and that, if permission is granted, will be secured by a condition on the planning permission. And finally, I think this photograph just simply shows the site in context. It shows the public rights of way and the positions where photographs have been taken to ensure that the new landscaping proposed for the site will screen the site from the public rights of way and from the beach. The recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to a number of conditions. One of perhaps two or three of the most important conditions is, whilst a 12-month occupancy is being sought, is to make it clear that that is for holiday use and not for residential use. We're securing a code of conduct as requested by by Natural England, and also to ensure that the applicant keeps up-to-date records of permanent addresses for the visitors who occupy the lodges, and other appropriate records such as driving licences and utility bills. But subject to those conditions, permission is recommended. Thank you.
Could I call David Sunnox, please? You've seen how it's done. Press the button. You'll have three. Okay, that's fine. You'll have 3 minutes. The bell will go after 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here this evening representing East Mersey Parish Council, the Parochial Church Council, the Village Hall Committee, and the numerous individuals who have collectively objected to the application for 60 additional holiday chalets at Coopers Beach. I've been asked to make the following points. Firstly, the scale of the development. This is a major increase in the number of units at Coopers Beach, and the application should not be taken out of context of just 60 extra units. There are already 620 caravans on the site, with an existing permission for a further 30 holiday chalets that have yet to be implemented. Together with the existing permission, another 60 chalets is a 15% increase in the size of the site. Traffic. The site is accessed by a single lane that is extremely narrow in parts. There's already considerable damage to verges where cars try to pass one another. Furthermore, there is no footpath. There is a very limited bus service, only one day a week, which makes car travel inevitable. The council wishes to promote the use of bicycles, but further traffic will actually reduce their use. Design. It's a very high density design with unimaginative landscaping. Economic benefit. The application states an economic benefit to the community. This is questionable as it will undoubtedly add further pressure to already strained services, notably the police who are frequently called to the site. Residential use. The application will move from caravans, non-permanent, to chalets, more permanent. The council's report states there is no permanent residence on site, but contrary to this, there is strong local evidence of people leaving to go to work. Lack of planning continuity. The parish council is getting frustrated by the lack of continuity in planning decisions, as local applications have been refused for villages small and poorly serviced by public transport, failed to meet aims of policies SD1, H1 and TA1, failed to accord with policy DP23. The application also ignores the village plan, a document which took literally hundreds of hours to prepare. East Mersey is not anti-development, and in fact the parish council is proactively engaged in implementing an affordable housing scheme. However, the community wishes for development that will be of benefit to the village, especially by enabling young families with children to afford to live in the community and be part of it. This proposed development is completely contrary to this. The Chairman of the Parish Council has expressly wished me to ask you to please take into account the comments that have been made, as we rely upon you to decide what is right and best for the borough, and especially with regards to the density of this proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have you got everything you wanted to say? Andrew Dowell. Okay, same rules will apply. You'll have 3 minutes, and the bell will go at 2 to let you know you've got 1 more minute.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee, for allowing me to speak in support of this application. My name is Andrew Dowell, and I represent our client, Park Resorts, who own and manage Cooper's Beach Holiday Park. The proposal is for a change of use of a parcel of land to the west of the existing holiday park to site 60 holiday lodge caravan pitches, access roads and landscaping. Cooper's Beach is one of our clients' most popular holiday parks and is a major driver in the local economy. The site is already allocated for caravan park use in the adopted site allocations document in 2010. The principle of the use has therefore already been agreed. The application site addresses the site allocations criteria as follows. A contribution towards highway and access improvements will be provided. The proposals will not have a detrimental effect on St Edmund's Church near to the site. A landscaping scheme which has been designed to minimise the impact of the extended site on the surrounding landscape has been provided. A code of conduct which seeks to guide appropriate behaviours and activities has been agreed with Natural England. And no caravans will be located in flood zone 3A. Moving on to the consultations, the 3 main issues have been raised in consultation, which I'll briefly address. Traffic generation, the Highway Authority concludes that the trips generated by the proposed development will be insignificant and easily accommodated without detriment to vehicle flows and road safety on the surrounding highway network. The Parish Council also raised concern about the possibility of full-time residential occupancy. The conditions ensure that the caravans will be for holiday purposes only and not as a person's sole place of residency. Park Resorts is a national holiday park operator who wants to attract holidaymakers to use their facilities, and it's not in their interest to have residential use of the site. Every customer at the park is required to sign a pitch licence agreement, the terms of which make it more than clear that holiday home as a permanent residence is prohibited. The Parish Council also raised concern with regard to the proposed layout. The park has been designed to meet modern customer expectations and provides the separation distances to satisfy site licence standards. The layout is also limited by the slope of the site. I hope this addresses matters of concern raised by the local residents for the committee's consideration, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Could you just press the button in the middle? We have a visiting councillor, Councillor Sheen. You're very welcome.
Chair and Deputy Chair and members of the Planning Committee. First of all, I do apologise for my voice tonight. I have certain nasal problems,
Good
but I
evening
hope
and welcome everybody to this meeting of the Council.
You've heard David Sunnox of East Mersey Parish Council explain the reasons why the Parish Council are concerned about this potential development. I will not repeat the reasons here, but I can say that I fully support the Parish Council's concerns in this matter. These concerns may not be appropriate in terms of the strict planning guidelines, which I know you have to uphold, but they do seem to me to be eminently sensible and valid in terms of the planning application you are looking at tonight. I would like to mention one specific aspect of the Parish Council's concern. The Parish Council and residents of East Mersey are concerned about the possibility of the holiday lodges being used as permanent residences. David Sunnox has reported to you there is local evidence that some people are living in caravans full-time and effectively treating the site as a permanent residence, as opposed to using the caravans for holiday purposes only. Indeed, I understand that the Council has identified a number of caravan owners who in the past have been found out to be living at Cooper's Beach full-time. The Parish Council's concern in this respect is that if some caravans are being used as permanent residences, the likelihood of holiday lodges also being used for the same purpose is a distinct possibility. I say this as the lodges would be a more substantial nature than the caravans, and I suspect some owners may be tempted to live at the site full-time. I note that the recommendation by the planning officer to uphold the application is subject to a number of conditions. One such condition seeks to allay the fears of the Parish Council in relation to the holiday lodges being occupied as residential homes. In this connection, I would like to thank Sue Jackson, the Senior Planning Officer in charge of this case, for including this specific condition into the Council's report. If this application proves successful, I would ask that the officers take a very proactive stance in this connection and monitor the situation very carefully and on a regular basis. In summary, I hope you can appreciate the Parish Council's concern here and take their and my comments into consideration in reaching your decision on this planning application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue Jackson, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chairman. I think two things to make clear. First is that the site is allocated. It was specifically allocated in 2010 for holiday use, so the principle of the extension of the caravan site was agreed at that time. In terms of the spacing of the holiday lodges, and the same with the caravans on this site and other sites on the island, that is not something that is controlled under planning legislation. It's part of the site licence dealt with by our licensing team in terms of the appropriate spacing between the caravans. So that's not something that we as planners have control over. In terms of the 12-month occupancy, it's not the first time I've sat here and explained these applications to you. It's been a trend on all the, or the majority of the caravan sites on the island. And as I've explained previously, 12-month occupancy is for holiday use is supported by central government, having investigated it, to refuse planning permission because 12-month occupancy could lead to residential use, has always been dismissed at appeal, and inspectors have imposed a condition simply requiring the holiday owner to keep details of permanent addresses for the occupiers of the site. The condition that we've imposed on other sites and are suggesting on this one is, I would say, more robust than the condition that the planning inspectors have imposed at appeal. I am aware of allegations that people are living on the caravan site at Cooper's Beach. This site is slightly unusual in as much as there's no planning condition controlling the occupancy of the caravans. It was a site that was allowed to appeal sometime in the 1960s, and the then inspector took the view that occupancy could be controlled adequately by the site licence, and so the planning permission for the caravan site is simply a red line and a number of caravans. And so the allegations of residential use have been investigated by our licensing team. And if they're provided with further evidence, then obviously they can investigate that further. I don't think, well, it's certainly not a reason to refuse planning permission for this site. This site has to be determined on its merits, and if there's any breach of conditions, and as we are suggesting a planning condition, that will be investigated by both our planning enforcement team, and similar conditions on the licence will be investigated by the licensing team. So this application has to be determined on its merits, and what may or may not have happened in respect to the adjacent land isn't something that members can really take into account when making a decision. It's certainly not something that planning permission could be refused for. Comments been made regarding the sort of economic benefits of the site or of the proposed lodges. Obviously, there will be some economic benefits in terms of use of shops, facilities, public houses, both in West Mersey and East Mersey, and comment regarding residential use elsewhere in East Mersey where applications may have been refused. And I think all I can say there is that policies for holiday and tourism use are different to policies for new dwellings within East Mersey. So it's obviously a distinction made between the two. I think that probably answers all the questions that were asked. If not, I'm happy to answer any that I've missed. Thank you.
Have two councillors to speak, Councillor Chillingworth and Councillor Moore.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry, yes, we should. No, it's East Mersey. So it is you, Councillor Chillingworth.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have great sympathy with the Parish Council, the Parochial Church Council, and the local residents. From a planning point of view, there is very little we can do. However, I'm very concerned that we have incremental holiday development, and I do understand why we have policies which encourage this. But there comes a time when the balance must become so that the detriment to the local residents is actually impinged by this policy. And I just wonder where this lies. Is it with highways, when they say this narrow lane to East Mersey has had enough, no more development? I'm just exploring this because I just wonder whether we can send a message to planning policy that we feel that the incremental development on these sites is now beginning to impinge on the amenity of residents. I'll leave that. As far as the problem of the licence and the allegation that people are living permanently on this site, I do urge the parish council to get the evidence and to go to licensing and to make sure that if it's firm evidence that action can be taken. I'm afraid there's nothing we can do except perhaps pass the message on again through officers to the licensing department that these allegations have been made, and can they once again do a thorough check. But I do understand that it's in the interests of the developer, the license holder, to ensure that that license is properly maintained and that people aren't living there, because if it's found otherwise, they are in danger of losing their license and a considerable amount of money. I think that's all I want to say at the moment, Chairman.
Councillor Moore, the neighbouring ward councillor.
Thank you. I'd like to start with one statement and then ask several questions. It is not a major economic driver in East Mersey because there are no facilities in East Mersey apart from one pub. There is no shop. There is nothing. Therefore, that's not an argument for it. Yes, they can go to West Mersey, but that involves a drive of several miles. But I just want to make that quite clear. My questions are, what is the nature of this sustainable transport we've heard about? And is it possible, is it within our power to suggest that this is phased in say, in 3 lots, which would be an easier on the community? They could, take it on board slowly and get used to, and also see what effect we would also be able to see what the effect was on the roads, etc. I think that's probably. Oh, I know. We are considering a proposed change of use. Now, it already has holiday use. What is the change? Well, can you explain to me exactly what this change is? In fact, what it is that we are agreeing or not agreeing to? Thank you.
Councillor Hayes and Councillor Chur.
I would like to raise the question of the flood zone. In paragraph 15.2 of the report, it says the following requirements were identified as part of the site allocation. And then bullet point 4 says no caravans shall be located in flood zone 3A. I'd like to know whether the words or chalets can be added to that. And I would suggest that perhaps those words should be added. And I would also like to know where flood zone 3A exactly is, and is there any flood zone 2 involved? Because that's not ideal either, is it? I'm just thinking that only a couple of winters ago we had people from Tendring who lived at, I think, Jaywick, or was it Point Clear? Anyway, they ended up spending the night in Leisure World because because of a storm surge, and of course they happen particularly in the winter time where it's more deadly because the water's very cold, and the proposal here is effectively for people to be in those premises during the winter, whereas before they weren't allowed.
Councillor Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to add to Councillor Chillingsworth's messages, and this is the message to the Highway Authority and to the developers. Can you please show the lane that has got many potholes in it, Sue? Could you show the lane with the many potholes in it, please?
Church Lane here, I've driven it relatively recently. I don't think there's any...
Oh, there was a lane there going down to the church.
As you come...
Yeah, there was a picture of a lane. That's it, that's the one. That's it.
This photograph shows the private road, which is within the ownership of the caravan site. And it's also a public right-of-way. The Highway Authority hasn't required any improvements to the private road.
Does this road, unless I get it wrong, does this road leads down to the church and to the caravan site?
No, this road leads down to the beach, and it's a private road that's purely used by the caravan site itself.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
We have Councillor Jarvis, and we'll go back to the officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to make the point that I think the parish council concerns about permanent living there are valid, but I'd also like to say that I'm appreciative of the fact that there has been a condition attached whereby the operators will monitor this. But what I would suggest is that it would be quite simple, I would have thought, that the production of a utility bill or a council tax bill for the main residence should be recorded by the operators and, if necessary, forwarded on to the planning officers if that was a requirement. Sure.
Sue Jackson, if you'd like to respond.
Thank you, Chairman. If I start with the last question first, certainly in terms of the planning condition, that we are suggesting or recommending that records are kept of utility bills and council tax bills. So that will be done as part of this application if it's granted planning permission. I think the licensing team have their own separate requirements. I'm not sure if that includes utility bills or council tax bills, but obviously following the discussion this evening I can pass on to the members' concerns about possible residents living on the existing site and ask them to investigate that again. Comments were made in respect of or concerning the proposals for sustainable transport. They're set out in some detail on page 85 of the report. The applicants are proposing a travel plan framework and a travel plan, and it's predominantly promoting cycles from the site. A cycle hire facility is going to be provided, and allowing cycles to be hired in advance, and each of the units will have parking for four cycles, and there'll be information packs about cycle hire, bus routes, public rights of way, footpaths, which will be available for all the visitors to the holiday site. Comment was made about the flood zone. This site is within flood zone 1, it's not within 2 or 3. As you get closer to the water, then that is within flood zone 3, but that's not part of this current application. In terms of phasing in the development, I don't think that's something that we would suggest members condition. I think the 60 lodges it's part of the application. I think the application should be determined on that basis. I don't think it would be appropriate to look to limit or regulate the phasing of the proposal. Thank you.
Have Councillor Sykes, Councillor Moore, then Councillor McLean.
Perhaps I should declare an interest as an owner of a lodge in Norfolk. Disappointed that this is a big company and they haven't put much money in at all regarding roads, walkways, cycle paths. I would have thought that that would have added to the attraction. Regarding use of local shops, in lodges like this, they're equipped with washing machines, fridges, freezers and that sort of thing. And people who are going down there for holidays, they go down equipped. They don't really use the local shops because people are going to go down and they're looking at the beaches and the surrounding areas. And a more secure way of monitoring residents would be if you use council tax, because that is against a property rather than the utility bills that can be misused, I believe, because although I'm on a site that doesn't belong to where you are, and it isn't a full 12 months, it's only 10 months, and in that time you have to leave, have to be off-site for a certain time. There has been misuse of that, so it is easily done. So I think you really need to tighten up.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I didn't get my explanation of exactly what this change of use is. I think some of the committee are a little confused over what it is we're being asked to agree to, or what the fundamentals of it. And the other thing is that it is spurious to suggest cycles an alternative means of transport. The road from the lane in either direction towards Cudmore Grove or towards West Mersey is lethal for bicycles. People speed along there. It is lethal to walk on it, certainly to cycle on it. I cycle a lot and I would not cycle up there. And if we could have an explanation exactly the nuts and bones of what it is we are.
I believe Councillor Chillingworth, your question wasn't answered. Do you want to repeat it for me?
Where do we stop, basically? And can we make representations to policy to say enough is enough? Because East Mersey is almost inundated with holiday homes. Where does the policy in relation to that economic holiday development impinge, in policy terms, on the amenity of the residents? I'm trying to explore this and whether we can pass messages on.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know what contributions that the applicant's going to be making to Mersey. I know they've suggested the upkeep of a car park. Well, I mean, that doesn't seem to be as if there's an awful lot that needs doing to it, and that's not going to come to a lot of money, but there's going to be a huge imposition to the people of East Mersey. There's no bus route, maybe one a week, did somebody say? You know, and they're next door to Colchester, heritage town. How are they going to come into Colchester by car? You know, what contributions are, you know, is East Mersey or West Mersey going to get? That's what I'd like to know, please.
Sue Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. To clarify, the application before you this evening is for the red outlined land and proposes its change of use to the site of 60 Holiday Lodge caravans. The other application I mentioned to you relates to these buildings here, which is the conversion of the farm buildings to holiday lodges. So that is separate. That is these buildings here, if I can get this to work, which it doesn't seem to want to do. But anyway, that is a distinct and separate application to the to the current application. So all I was trying to do is explain that there have been a range of different applications, but they relate to different land and different buildings. So the application you're considering this evening is for the land edged red, is for 60 holiday lodges, but in addition, on another part of the site, there has been planning permission to convert farm buildings to holiday lets. The proposal is for the change of use, and the change of use is to allow the siting of 60 holiday lodge caravans. So that's what the application is for. And from
changing use.
It's land that's really been unused. It's not agricultural land. It's land that's within the ownership of the caravan site that has been used for, just been allowed to sort of naturalise over the years. It hasn't had any specific use at all. I think occasionally it's been used for the siting of or the storage of caravans, but it's had no specific use. But it's always been part of the caravan site, part of their land holding, as it were. Councillor Chillingworth commented about whether the sort of tourism holiday use in East Mersey has sort of really reached the stage where perhaps planning policy should say no more. It's probably an appropriate time to raise this with the planning policy team, as the local plan's being reviewed as we speak. So certainly I can pass that on to them to look at perhaps the whole of East Mersey in terms of the possible expansion or limit on expanding the sort of number of caravan sites already in East Mersey. In terms of utility bills, yes, the condition is recommending that utility bills and council tax bills are a record is kept of those. In terms of Section 106 contributions, there's no contributions being proposed because the application is considered as holiday use, not residential use. If we were to be seeking the normal contributions, then we would be tantamount to saying we're considering this as residential development, not holiday development. Hopefully that covers all the points, but I'm sure you'll tell me if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, has every point been answered? Okay, I have no more speakers, and as far as I know, I haven't got a proposal yet. The bus route, is it just one bus a week?
Other than during term time, when I think there might be additional school buses, yes, it is one bus a week. Yeah.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Chairman, reluctantly, because this is an allocated site and really our hands are tied, I propose we accept the recommendation with all the conditions.
Very, very reluctantly, I will actually second it, because it is one of those, and I think it's really important that we do make representations to the local plan and say when is enough, because we've had this several times for different reasons, where development keeps going, and at some point, although it's only small, there's got to be a point at which the combined effect is just too much. So we have a proposal, it's been seconded. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour.
All those against?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against.
Abstentions?
And 1 abstention.
Okay, that is carried. Okay, it's 8 o'clock and we will be taking a break back here at 8:10, please.